The Oracle Network.
Hi everybody, my name is Steph and I'm the host of Sinister Story Hour. Join us every other week as we dive into a new case of true crime, cults, paranormal experiences, or conspiracy theories. You can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Sinister Story Hour. You can find me on Twitter at Sinister Hour. Please send show suggestions or listener stories to sinisterstoryhour@gmail.com. Our Patreon is now up and you can support the show for as little as $1 per month. Enjoy perks like ad-free episodes, and there will be more coming soon. As always, if you like the show and would like to support me, you can buy me a coffee. Stay tuned as we jump into this week's case. Hi everybody, thank you for joining me. My name is Steph, and this is the Sinister Story Hour, so thank you so much. I saw yesterday we added Italy to our listeners, and so thank you, Italy. It's so humbling to have somebody in Italy watching and seeing what the show is doing and listening, tuning in, so thank you so much. And people here in Wyoming as well are tuning in, so thank you so much for the Wyoming listeners, my local supporters that have tuned in and started listening as well. Happy 2022! I can't believe we're here to 2022. This is the year that my oldest will graduate, so I'm feeling very old. And we lost Betty White on the last day of 2021. So as a huge Golden Girls fan my entire life, that was such a sad thing. So sad. And I saw so many others on Twitter talking about it yesterday as well. I tried to stay off, but my fellow Golden Girls fans we helped each other through it. So thank you. And to fellow Golden Girls fans, seriously, you're the best kind of people ever. So we will get into our case tonight. We have kind of a little bit of a different case tonight. This case actually takes place in Delaware County, Iowa, in a town called Earlville, and it's a very, very small town. Population around 700 people, so very small place. And we are talking about a couple named Todd and Amy Mullis. They had been in Iowa their entire lives. They were both born and raised in Iowa. The couple actually met at the county fair, and I cannot think of anything more wholesome than that, the humble meeting at the county fair. So they both enjoyed outdoor activities such as hunting and fishing, which I really would expect from a couple that's from such a small town and a rural community. I would really expect that hunting and fishing would be kind of among their hobbies. Amy was an RN at one time at the hospital in the emergency department, and Todd is described as a devoted, hardworking father of 3 kids. And he had spent most of his life being a farmer. Very humble man. He seemed very, very caring, and he was just described as being very, very hardworking, devoted to his family, just kind of like your average rural town guy, right? So Todd not only had one farm, but in 2016, Todd, Amy, Todd's brother, and his father became owners of additional farmland. Now, Todd had obtained more land with his dad and brother also at one point, so it seemed like as far as accumulating assets was concerned, Todd was really successful at this point. Now, for this case, I used the Crime Shack podcast, which I am loving so much. This was actually the first episode that she ever did, and I loved it so much. So if you have not checked out the Crime Shack yet, honestly, go there. Obviously, please listen to me first. Check her out. She did an amazing job. Her name is Michelle, and leave her a review while you're at it. So she's doing a wonderful job. I also used the 48 Hours episode and Nancy Grace Crime Stories episode on this, as well as a few other websites that I will list in my show notes. So please go check those out and see my sources for this. So this story is sounding really, really great so far. I mean, we're talking about a small town community, 2 loving people who meet at a county fair. They enjoy the same things. They have a family, and it's looking great, right? But you know that we wouldn't be talking about it if it was all great. So we do have some problems becoming prevalent in the marriage. Now, in the Crime Shack podcast, the host mentions that as a general rule in small towns, Good news travels fast and bad news travels faster. And I related with this so much. Me, myself living in a small town and a small rural area, I relate with this so much, but that really couldn't be truer for this case. They were both sharing a lot of things about their marriage. They were sharing their problems. They were talking about their problems with other people, friends and outsiders, and it just seemed like so many people knew what was going on between the two of them. And that seemed kind of odd to me, that they both were reaching out to so many different people about what was happening in their marriage. One thing that did stand out to me is how many friends it seemed like Amy had. There were a lot of people that seemed, like I said, to know about the problems in this marriage, but it seemed like Amy just had a ton of friends. There were a lot of different friends mentioned. A lot actually testified at the trial that we'll talk about later. So it was just a lot of people involved in her life. She was talking to a lot of people, reaching out. And Amy would often complain that Todd worked too much. Amy was kind of the type of person that liked going out and doing things. Todd was more of a stay-home kind of guy, a homebody. And so those things they didn't really have in common, which I understand because I'm so much of a homebody that if I was with somebody that constantly wanted to go out and do things, it would really bother me. And I'm sure my preference of lifestyle would bother them. So I can understand that part. Now, Amy's friend states that she had been unhappy in her marriage and that she hadn't actually been happy for years. And in 2013, while Amy was working at the hospital, Todd actually found out that she was having an affair. Now, after the affair, Amy had quit her job at the hospital and they had been trying to kind of work things out. They sought marital counseling and she was really trying to make things work with Todd. And so she was going to stay primarily just working on the farm, spend more time with Todd, really try to work together on their marriage. Todd states that she was actually doing this willingly because she wanted to spend time with her family. She wanted to give up the hospital life, devote more time to her family. But according to her friends, Amy really felt like that was the only option that she had, and she didn't really feel like Todd was ever going to trust her again after this affair. Todd said that in their marital counseling that the counselor had actually suggested that they would have full disclosure. And the only thing that I ever read about that was it would be necessary for Amy to tell Todd where she was at all times. And so if she would go to the store, go out to lunch with friends, she was constantly having to tell him when she would get there, when she would leave. And it just seemed like there was a lack of trust there. But I never could find anything that actually said that Todd was doing the same thing. So I'm not sure if it was both ways, that he was actually disclosing everything that he was doing, or if it was just more about Amy telling him because he just did not trust her at all during this time. There were only certain friends that Amy was allowed to see during this time, and he was actually timing her when she was out of the house. So Amy's friends would make jokes about it with her, and they would call her the POT, and that was an acronym that stood for Prisoner of Todd. So it kind of surprises me how much the friends knew. There was such a lack of trust in this relationship, and there were some things that were happening that maybe weren't so great, and they were kind of aware of everything going on and trying to help, but it was more of a joke at it than anything at this point. Todd's side of the story was very different. He would go on to say that they basically spent every moment together on the farm, that things were going well, and that they were pretty happy, and that they enjoyed spending all of this time together, and he didn't have any problems. Now, in the spring of 2018, Todd does notice some changes in Amy's behavior. Amy would go off into the bedroom alone a lot with her phone, which she hadn't been doing previously. Since he had been down this road before, Todd immediately becomes suspicious of Amy. So he begins to kind of wonder about it. He looks over their phone records, and he discovers over 100 text messages between Amy and the farm manager, Jerry Frazier. Jerry Frazier was actually a field manager for the Mullis farm. He worked for them for quite a while before this point. Todd actually called Jerry to confront him and ask him, what's going on? I'm seeing a lot of text messages between my wife and you, and I just want to know why. And Jerry basically says, no, there's no other reason. It's just kids. we're talking about showing animals at fair, and we're talking about sports and kids' activities and scheduling, and it's really nothing. It's not a big deal. And so he denies that anything else is going on. Todd does feel a little better about things after Jerry denies that there's anything going on, but he still calls Amy's stepmom to ask for advice, which, if you remember, I did say that they are involving so many people in this marriage, and the fact that he called the stepmom to ask for advice suggests that, wow, they are really involving a lot of people instead of talking to his own wife about it. So Amy's stepmom actually suggests calling Jerry's wife to find out what's going on. And I kind of get the impression that due to this being such a rural place and such a small town, that they actually probably already knew each other. And so it was probably not such a big deal to just call out of the blue and ask, because they probably had known each other for quite a few years. That's the impression I get. So Jerry's wife tells Todd that she can't believe that anything would be happening, that they do have a happy marriage. She didn't believe that Jerry would be seeing anybody else, and she dismisses it. She just doesn't even think it's legitimate. There's probably nothing to worry about. And so it does make Todd a little bit more comfortable, and he actually goes a few days later and apologizes to them. He calls them each. He calls Jerry and Jerry's wife each to apologize to them for having handled it incorrectly, he says. And so he reaches out to them and apologizes. Now, unfortunately, that would turn out to be not the case, and Amy had actually been seeing Jerry for a little while. Jerry, as we know, was married. He was a father of 2, and Amy just quite frankly had liked the attention that she was receiving from Jerry. They had been meeting in secret on the farm. They were meeting on back roads or motel rooms sometimes. And at first, it seemed like it was just kind of a purely sexual relationship. But at one point, Amy was really developing feelings for Jerry, and she was speaking with her friends about how she would eventually like to marry him. Amy had previously made it known to Jerry that she did feel like a slave or a hostage in her marriage to Todd, and how unhappy she was, and so he was very, very aware of Todd's insecurities and jealousies, and very aware that Todd was not going to handle this well if he did find out. Jerry, of course, goes back to Amy and says, "Hey, your husband is calling me. He's on to us." And they kind of figure out that they probably need to slow down on texting. Jerry's immediate solution to it is we need to slow down, but Amy still wanted to keep in contact with him. So Jerry actually got a Gmail account, and they would use Gmail and communicate back and forth via email. Amy went on to tell her friend Terry that Todd had confronted Jerry and that he had denied it, but tells her the real reason behind the text. And so even some of their friends were well aware of the affair that was happening. And she also tells her that at first the relationship, like I said, had been purely sexual, but now she was really falling in love with him. And it seems to me that Amy was the one kind of developing the feelings for Jerry when he was a little bit maybe trying to keep his distance from the situation. At the end of August 2018, Amy's friend Terry had attended a medical conference when somebody came up to her and actually mentioned in the conversation that they had heard rumors of how Amy was, quote, being naughty again. So when Terry brings that up to Amy, she decides to be very upfront about the rumors with Todd in an effort to minimize it. So she goes back to Todd and she tells him, "Hey, I heard these crazy rumors about myself, and I heard that I am sleeping with Jerry, and can you believe it?" And just kind of tries to minimize it in an effort to make sure that if Todd does hear it, that he's not going to take it seriously. And so Todd, of course, is not happy about these rumors happening and said that he was just really upset at the time, that why would people even have this idea, and that he wasn't happy. But she did try to be a little bit upfront about it in an effort to just kind of squash it before it even became a rumor back to him. Amy's friend Terry, who had previously given advice to both parties, like I said, she was She was aware of what was going on. Both Todd and Amy were talking and asking her for advice. She warns Amy that you're putting yourself in a really terrible position, and even went as far as to use the words, Todd will kill you if he finds out. So Jerry states that Amy had told him also that if Todd found out about the affair, he would have no problem making her disappear. She said if he finds out, that she believes that he would actually